What would you do if your child was born the same night a secret tree was destroyed, and the elders said he carried a god's wrath? He was a boy no one could touch without dying, until one girl placed her hand on his chest and everything changed.
The night the iroko tree burned. The iroko tree had stood for 300 years. It was old when great-grandfathers were young. It was tall when the village of Okeipa was nothing more than 3 huts and a cooking fire. The people of Okeipa, deep in the heart of Osun State, did not just love that tree, they feared it, in the way that you fear something that protects you. They left kola nuts at its roots every new moon. They did not allow children to play beneath its shadow after dark. They believed the spirit of Ogun, the ancient god of iron and war, lived inside its bark, watching, keeping balance, making sure that what was taken from the earth was returned. On the night of July the 14th, 1996, lightning came down from a sky that had no business having lightning. There were no clouds, there was no rain. There was only a silence so thick and heavy that the goats stopped chewing and the dogs pressed their bellies flat against the ground. Then the sky cracked. The bolt came straight and clean and final, like a sentence. It hit the iroko tree directly at its heart, and the crack that followed was not just sound, it was a feeling. Every person in Okeipa felt it in their chest, like something had been torn loose from inside them. The tree did not fall, it burned from the inside, quietly, with a fire that was orange at the bottom and white at the top, and it burned without smoke, which was the strangest part, because everything burns with smoke, everything except this. By morning, the tree stood black and hollow, and in the small hut at the edge of the village, a young woman named Fatu screamed as her baby came into the world. The baby boy did not cry, he opened his eyes instead. Black eyes, still eyes, eyes that looked at the clay ceiling of that hut as if he had seen it before and was not impressed. On his tiny chest, just over his heart, was a mark already there at birth, a birthmark shaped like a broken chain, 2 links split apart, dark as charcoal against his brown skin. The midwife saw it and stepped back. She stepped back slowly, the way a person steps back from a snake they are not sure is sleeping. "Fatu," she whispered, "what did you do?" Fatu did not answer. She was exhausted. She was 17 years old. She was alone because the baby's father had gone to Lagos 6 months ago and never returned, and her own parents had already told her that her situation was her problem and not theirs. By dawn, the midwife had spoken to her sister, who had spoken to her husband, who had spoken to the quarter chief, who had gone before dawn to knock on the iron door of Baba Agba, the village oracle. Baba Agba was 81 years old. He had been the oracle of Okeipa for 50 years. He had seen difficult things, strange things, things that would make younger men lose their minds. He came to see the baby that morning, and when he looked at the mark on the boy's chest, his face did something it had never done in 50 years of oracular service. It went afraid. "This child," he said, in a voice so quiet that only the 3 people closest to him could hear, "carries the anger of Ogun. He was born on the night the sacred tree was destroyed. The destruction and his birth are the same event, the same breath." He paused. "He must be returned to the river today, before the sun reaches the middle of the sky." Fatu heard every word from behind the curtain of her hut. She waited until the men left. She waited until the midwife went home to eat breakfast. She waited until the village was filling with the ordinary sounds of morning, the grinding of peppers, the crying of other people's children, the distant prayer from the mosque on the hill.
Then she wrapped her baby in the best cloth she had, the one with blue and yellow patterns that her mother had given her as a gift when she turned 15. She strapped him to her back, she took her small bag of clothes, her tin of savings that held 3,000 naira, and her father's old torch that still had batteries, and she walked into the forest. She did not look back at Okepa. She would never look back at Okepa. She named the baby Diji, which in her private broken language meant mine regardless. 17 years is a long time to be afraid of one person. The forest villages near the Osun River had many names for Diji by the time he was old enough to notice them. The withering boy, the one who walks alone, Ogun's mistake. Children who live near the path he used to fetch water were moved to different paths by their mothers. Market women subtly turned their backs when he passed, shielding their tomatoes and peppers with their bodies as if he might accidentally look at the vegetables and kill them. The strange thing was, he did not have to do anything. He simply had to be near something for it to begin to fail. Crops within 30 feet of where he slept grew pale and then brown. A cat that rubbed against his leg once was found dead 3 days later. A mango tree he climbed as a small boy purely because he wanted to touch the fruit like any child never produced fruit again. He learned to keep distance. He learned it the way children learn all truly important things, not from being told, but from watching what happened when they did not obey. He and Fatu lived in a small patched hut on the edge of a stream, far enough from the nearest village of Ire that nobody bothered them directly, but close enough that Fatu could walk to the market twice a week to sell the herbs she gathered. She was a careful woman, quiet. She loved Diji with the specific love of someone who has chosen to love against all advice. And that kind of love is the most solid kind, but it is also heavy to carry. Diji grew up reading. This was the gift Fatu gave him because she herself had 2 years of secondary school before her life changed direction. She found him old newspapers, second-hand textbooks, any paper with words on it. By the time he was 10, he had read more than most of the children in the surrounding villages. By 12, he was writing his own stories in a notebook, small, careful letters filling every line. Stories about boys who lived in cities where nobody knew their faces, where a person could be unknown and safe. He was tall at 17. Lean, with long arms and large hands, and the same black steel eyes he had been born with. The birthmark on his chest had grown with him, darker now and more defined, the 2 broken chain links sitting over his heart like a brand. He had never been touched by another person who was not his mother, not once. He did not realize how much this mattered until the morning at the Osun riverbank. He had gone early, before dawn, the way he always did to avoid the women who came to wash clothes after sunrise. He sat on a flat stone at the edge of the water and let his feet hang in. The river was cool and brown, and it moved steadily southward without caring about anyone's problems, which was a quality Diji respected deeply. He heard her before he saw her. A sound like humming, but not quite. It was somewhere between humming and prayer, the kind of sound that a person makes when they are not performing it for anyone, when they believe they are completely alone. He should have stood up and left. He knew that. Every survival instinct he had developed over 17 years said, stand up, move away, do not make yourself known. But the sound stopped him in the same way a beautiful sentence in a book could stop him. Suddenly, completely, as if time itself was asking him to wait. She came around the bend in the river path with a clay pot on her head and her hair braided back from her face. She was perhaps his age, perhaps a little younger, and her skin had a quality he had never seen in another person before, a faint luminescence, as if the morning light was not just landing on her, but coming from inside her. She opened her eyes and saw him. She did not step back. She did not turn around. She tilted her head slightly, the way a person tilts their head at something curious rather than something frightening. "You are the boy from the edge of the forest," she said. It was not a question. "Yes," he said, because there was no point in saying anything else. "My name is Aisha," she said. "Diji," he said. She set down her pot with great care. She walked toward him. Every sensible thing in her body told her to warn her off, and he opened his mouth to do exactly that. But she was already close, already reaching out her hand, and before he could speak, she had pressed her palm flat against his chest, against the mark. The light came from everywhere at once. It was not painful. It was not gentle either. It was enormous, the way a feeling is when it has been held back for a long time and suddenly has no wall to hold it back. They were both thrown backward, Diji into the water sputtering and terrified, and looked at his chest expecting to see the mark burn deeper, expecting pain. The mark was still there, but at his feet where the bank mud was grey and dead, a single red flower had pushed up through the earth, already open, already facing the sun. He stared at it for a very long time. Aisha, sitting up on the bank and pressing her glowing hands together, stared at it too. Neither of them said anything for a long while. Then Diji said very quietly, "That has never happened before." And Aisha said, even more quietly, "I know." What happened at the river was not a secret for long. Two women coming early to wash had seen the light from a distance. They had seen a boy and a girl thrown apart. They had not seen the flower, but they had seen enough. By the time the sun was directly overhead, the story had moved from the riverside to the market, from the market to the compound walls, from the compound walls to the inner rooms where the old men sat and made decisions about the lives of younger people. The village council of Ire met that evening in Baba Wira's compound. There were 7 of them, all men, all old, all carrying the particular heaviness of people who believe that their age gives them the right to determine what is sacred and what is not. They sat on wooden stools around a low flame and passed a cup of palm wine that nobody was actually drinking. Baba Wira, the head of the council, was 73 years old. He was thin and sharp-eyed, with hands that looked like carved wood and a voice that always sounded like it was finishing a sentence it had started somewhere else. He had raised Aisha since she was 3 years old, after her parents died in a bus accident on the Ibadan Expressway. He had always said he raised her out of kindness. He had always said she was like a daughter to him. He was the one who spoke first. "The girl has been contaminated," he said, simply and finally, the way a judge says a sentence. The other men murmured. One said, "We don't know for certain." "The light was seen," Baba Wira said. "The cursed boy touched her. His mark touched her hands. There is a ritual that must be done. The river cleansing." He paused. "It must be done in 3 days." The river cleansing. Every person in that room knew what it meant. It was an old ceremony, used for extreme contamination. The person was held beneath the Osun River at the sacred crossing point for a specific count. The elders claimed it purified. The truth which the older women of the village spoke only in whispers was that the count was too long, the water too strong at that crossing, and not every person who went in came back out the same way they went in. Some did not come back out at all. Aisha was brought before the council the next morning. She stood with her hands folded and her face perfectly still, and she listened to Baba Wira explain what would happen to her. She did not cry. She did not protest. She only looked at him, the man who had fed her and schooled her and called her daughter for 14 years, and something passed across her face that was too complicated to name. "I am not contaminated," she said when he finished. "I am the same as I was." "That is not your decision to make," Baba Wira said. "Then whose is it?" she asked. Nobody answered. She was taken to the council house and told to stay there until the morning of the third day. It was the council's youngest messenger, a boy of 12, who felt sorry for her, who told her the ceremony will happen at dawn on the third day. It was a village woman who had always secretly pitied Diji, who found Fatu at the edge of the forest and told her, "Your son's girl is going to die because of him." It was Fatu who walked through the night to find her son and told him, with tears running freely down her face and her voice completely steady, "You have to go into the forest. There is a way to break this. Your grandmother told me before she died. She told me there was a way, but she also told me what it would cost." Diji looked at his mother for a long time. "Tell me everything," he said. Fatu sat down on the ground, right there in the dark, and she told him. The curse was not Ogun's. She had always known this, had carried the knowing like a stone in her stomach for 17 years. Ogun had not cursed their bloodline. A person had. A human person using Ogun's name, the way criminals use respectable names to commit crimes, had placed a Bemisola curse, a ruination curse, on their family line 300 years ago. The sacred iroko tree had not been struck by lightning on the night of Diji's birth. It had been destroyed deliberately the night before, using old iron firecraft staged to look like an omen so that the oracle would declare the baby cursed, so that the baby would be thrown in the river, so that the bloodline would end. The person who placed the original curse wanted something their bloodline had, something that could only be claimed if every member of their family was dead. "What did we have?" Diji asked. Fatu looked at her hands. She said, "Land, but not just land, sacred land, a grove at the center of the Osun forest that has been in our family name since before Okeipa existed. Whoever owns that grove controls the oldest spiritual pathway in all of Osun State. It is worth more than money. It is worth power." She paused. "I found the original document hidden in your grandmother's Bible. Our family name is on it. The curse was meant to erase us so the land would go unclaimed." Diji stared at the dark. "The curse can be broken," Fatu continued, "but only at the original source, the iron shrine at the center of the Osun Grove. You have to go there. You have to bring the broken chain to the shrine." She touched his chest, the mark, gently. "This mark is not just a curse, it is a key. Your grandmother said it was the original seal. Whoever placed the curse could not destroy your bloodline completely, so they sealed it. The mark holds the seal. Only Ogun's true shrine can open it." Diji stood up. "The girl," he said, "has 3 days," Fatu said. "You have 2. The forest will take you 1 full day if you do not lose the path." She pressed a small folded paper into his hand, a hand-drawn map, old and creased. "Your grandmother drew this. She never had the courage to go. I never had the courage. You are the one who was born carrying it." She put her hands on both sides of his face. "Diji, come back." He held her hands for a moment, his large, still hand over hers. Then he turned and walked into the forest.